Marco Rubio had a terrible day on Capitol Hill, where he appeared at a hearing as a witness before the United States Senate. Rubio folded under the aggressive cross-examination by senators, particularly the Democratic senators led the way. Democratic senators like Duckworth and Kaine and Schatz and Rosen and others were grilling the Secretary of State. He got very nervous at times, and his nervous habit is to reach for the water bottle and start chugging it. You saw that happen multiple times. Also, Marco Rubio appears to have engaged in numerous instances of perjury for which he should be held accountable. I'll let you form your own opinions if he completely lied the way I formed my opinion that he completely lied. So let me show you what went down at this hearing. First, you have Democratic Senator Tammy Duckworth cross-examining Marco Rubio, Secretary of State, about Donald Trump invoking the Wartime Aliens Act. And Duckworth says, so are we at war, yes or no, with Venezuela? Do you believe that's an act of war? Let's play this clip.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary, last March, the president invoked the Alien Enemies Act, a notorious wartime law last used for Japanese internment. He said that he was responding to the Maduro regime's supposed invasion or other acts of war against the United States. But in recent weeks, you, the Department of Justice, and our friends across the aisle have repeatedly said that we are not at war with Venezuela. Secretary Rubio, if that is true and we are not at war with Venezuela, will you advise the president to rescind his invocation of the Wartime Alien Enemies Act?
Well, that was a mechanism to remove people from our country that prevent grave danger. So, for example, we know for a fact that Tren de Aragua was a very dangerous gang. In fact, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I may have been the first member of Congress.
This is a wartime act, Mr. Secretary.
Well,
are we currently at war with Venezuela?
No, we're not in a state of war in Venezuela.
Okay, the Supreme Court has described the Alien Enemies Act as a wartime power, our Supreme Court. And before now, the Alien Enemies Act was only invoked during the War of 1812, World War I, World War II, when it was used to intern thousands of innocent civilians. Are you really arguing that the president should be able to wield an internment law?
No, but we're talking about two separate things here. So you're talking about the state of Venezuela, or are describing the regime.
And
we're talking about, but what the president designated.
Invoked the Alien Enemies Act.
I know, Senator, but let me be clear with you. No, but
next you have Democratic Senator Schatz say, so is the next plan by the Trump regime to do regime change in Cuba just so the American people have peace of mind? Can you rule out another regime change? And watch what Rubio says. Here, play this clip.
You're just going to move on to a couple of other issues. Your comments that Havana should be concerned about the Maduro operation is fueling speculation that this administration will turn its sights to Cuba next. Will you make a public commitment today to rule out U.S. regime change in Cuba?
Regime change?
Yes.
Oh, no, I think we would love to see the regime there change. We would like to. That doesn't mean that we're going to make it change, but we would love to see it change. There's no doubt about the fact that it would be of great benefit to the United States if Cuba was no longer governed by an autocratic regime.
But you know what we mean by regime change. We don't mean I wish someone else were in charge. When we talk about regime change, we're talking about using the power of the United States, usually kinetic power, but often other kinds of coercion. And I'm not even saying that that's always not in our interests. I'm just saying, I'm not asking you whether we would prefer a different kind of government. I'm asking whether you're trying to precipitate the fall of the current regime.
Yeah, but that's statutory. The Helms-Burton Act, the U.S. embargo on Cuba is codified. It was codified in law, and it requires regime change in order for us to lift the embargo.
Okay.
Next, you have Democratic Senator Van Hollen grilling Marco Rubio about whether or not Trump informed oil executives about the invasion of Venezuela before it took place, as Donald Trump publicly stated that he told the oil executives before Congress. Rubio says that never happened. Donald Trump didn't say that. Okay, well, we actually have tape of Donald Trump saying that he informed the oil executives before he informed Congress, but watch Rubio lie. As I said, this is why I believe Rubio's been engaging in perjury. Here, play this clip.
Now, President Trump has said publicly that he had communications with folks from the oil industry about going into Venezuela before anyone here in Congress was notified. Mr. Secretary, simple yes or no question. Were you with President Trump during any of those conversations he had with people with oil interests in Venezuela about the possibility of deposing Maduro?
That's not a simple yes or no question, but I can answer it quickly. And that is, the president always elicits opinions from all sorts of people, including, for example, Chevron has an active license in Venezuela. They operate in Venezuela. They've been doing so even when the sanctions were in place. So of course you would ask Chevron, what is your opinion of Delcy Rodriguez? What are your opinion of their economy and of their prospect? But the notion that somehow the president authorized this challenge at the urging of oil executives is absurd. That never happened.
Mr. Secretary, I'm asking whether you were with the president.
That never happened. I couldn't be with him because it never happened. The oil executives were not involved whatsoever in any of the planning on this matter. None.
Did the president, as he said publicly, inform them about the U.S. operations?
I think all of those executives learned about this operation the same time everybody else did.
Well, President Trump has said the opposite in public.
No.
Yes, he has. I mean, he said it. I think it was aboard Air Force One on an airplane. It's on public record. You can take a look. Look.
Next, you have Democratic Senator Duckworth talk about her experience as a soldier serving in Iraq alongside our NATO allies. And she grills Marco Rubio here about Donald Trump's statements that our NATO allies were not fighting with American soldiers in Afghanistan, and how hateful and harmful that is to our relationship with our allies, given the ultimate sacrifices our NATO allies made for the United States in Afghanistan and elsewhere. Here, play this clip.
And let me just say something about the president's recent comments about NATO allies. When I served in Iraq, there were Polish forces there with us. There were British forces there with us. There were Spanish forces there with us. I personally landed in Elzi, España, which came under direct attack by insurgents. Polish troops who have worked with the Illinois military, with the Illinois National Guard for 30 years, died in Afghanistan, Mr. Secretary.
All the president wants is for NATO to have more
our NATO allies have stood beside us.
He wants our allies to have more NATO.
We need to maintain the strength of that alliance.
I get it. All the president wants
your time's up. Not making much progress here.
Well, let me just say, the president just wants our allies to have more capabilities to be involved in operations like that, God forbid, in the future if necessary.
That's not an
unreasonable
he said
request.
That they stayed a little behind, and they certainly did not come to our defense. And
not every country in Europe, not every country in NATO participated in those missions.
Denmark suffered some of the greatest military casualties.
There's no doubt that many of our allies have stepped forward and provided assistance to us, and there are many others that simply don't have the capability to do it now or in the future.
That's not what the president said.
Senator Lee was pointing to.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
You see how squirmy Rubio is? It's lie after lie after lie from Rubio. Next, Democratic Senator Rosen cross-examines Rubio about Juan Orlando Hernandez and asks Rubio a very basic question. Juan Orlando Hernandez is one of the biggest drug traffickers, narco-terrorists that ever existed. Donald Trump pardoned Juan Orlando Hernandez. And so Senator Rosen said, isn't it true that Hernandez was somebody who trafficked drugs into the United States and killed people? He was convicted of that in the United States in federal court proceedings. So will Rubio even admit to that? No, he won't, because he lies about everything. Watch Rubio squirm. Here, play this clip.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ranking Member, and thank you, Secretary Rubio, for being here. I'm going to get right into it because I want to build on Senator Van Hollen's line of questioning. President Trump pardoned the former Honduran president after he was convicted of trafficking roughly 400 tons of cocaine into the United States. Cocaine that contributed to the deaths of tens of thousands of Americans year after year. Yet the president and his cabinet authorized a military operation to capture Nicolas Maduro in order to arrest him for virtually the same crime. So yes or no, because I have a bunch of questions here. To the best of your knowledge, was Hernandez convicted of trafficking approximately 400 tons of cocaine into the United States?
I'm not involved in the pardon process. I can tell you.
No, I'm just asking if
but I don't do yes or no. I don't play games. This is not a game show.
Do you know okay, so I'm just going to tell you
I can answer your question because I know what you're getting at, but go ahead.
He was convicted. I know.
The president felt that he was unfairly treated. I can't give you much insight because I'm not involved in the pardon process.
Would you not concede? Can you not understand how the American people and how the world are clearly going to be frustrated by the hypocrisy of this when one man is convicted and pardoned and another man captured, and how it undermines the United States' credibility on the world stage?
But the difference is that, again, I can't opine on the specifics of his case because I wasn't involved in the pardon, but he was not a sitting office holder. He was not even the president of Honduras when that decision was made, either to convict him. The difference between him and Nicolas Maduro is he was actively engaged in narco trafficking. It was an ongoing endeavor.
I think it does undermine our credibility. But I'm going to move on to some foreign policy.
Now you have Democratic Senator Schatz talk about and cross-examine Rubio about Donald Trump taking the oil money from Venezuela and moving it over to bank accounts in Qatar controlled by Donald Trump with no legal oversight by Congress. And under what legal authority, Rubio, do you believe that we just take this money and move it to bank accounts in Qatar? Here, play this clip.
Again, I want to ask about the oil. Under U.S. law, funds received by the government must be deposited with Treasury. Earlier, you testified that the funds are being held short-term in Qatar and then will move to a Treasury blocked account. What is the statutory authority for the administration relying on Qatar to hold the funds?
It's not our funds. The funds are in an account that's owned and signed. It's an account that belongs to Venezuela, but it has U.S. sanctions as a blocking mechanism on it. And one of the primary reasons why it was in a third country initially, until we could create the mechanism to move it to a U.S. presence, is twofold. One, we have an issue we're working through on recognition. What is exactly, you have to recognize a government, but we don't recognize this government. We recognize the 2015 National Assembly. So we have to find some creative way legally to meet that standard. The other is frankly creditors. If any of that money touched a U.S. bank, even if it was an account in the name of the Venezuelans, it would immediately be seized upon by a number of creditors who eventually will have to take care of. But in the short term, that would impede the ability of the Venezuelan authorities to receive the funds they need to operate.
So do you have this is what I'm trying to get at, right? Either it's American money, in which case it's subject to the Miscellaneous Receipts Act, and there are all kinds of things that attend to that. You're saying it's Venezuela's money, but it does sound like, according to the EO, according to the president's statements, you are in charge of that money. What authority are you relying on to be in charge, almost in a sort of receivership kind of arrangement, of how funds are both received and expended for a foreign country? Like, wouldn't you have to come to Congress to establish that kind of relationship?
Well, no, because the money never enters our hands. We only control the disbursement of the money. We don't control the actual money.
Sure,
in
but
the
if
sense
you're,
of,
but that's
like it comes into our bank account.
Do you think that you have somewhere in the statute or the Constitution the authority to control disbursements of a foreign country?
Well, they've agreed to this. And that's the key. They've agreed to this arrangement in which the sanctions that are placed on this oil is what blocks its distribution. So we've agreed to release sanctions and allow the disbursement of the funding as long as they're spending it in a certain way. So I understand it's novel, but it's the best we could come up with in the short term to ensure that they're...
Is there a written agreement that memorializes this?
And yes, I believe there is, and there will have to be one most certainly once we transition that to U.S. accounts.
Secretary, my understanding is the committee doesn't have this agreement.
Well, I can...
If we do or we don't.
Yeah. And you probably wouldn't because it's a Treasury matter. Treasury's handled it, but I can most certainly talk to Treasury about providing you the information.
Also, you're the National Security Advisor, so you do have a role here in coordinating between the department. So it's not just like you can punt this to Treasury.
Yeah, I just didn't bring the document with me.
I got it. Okay. I just want you to land it and get it to the committee because you're being transparent. I think this is novel. I think it's funky. I think it may not even be permissible. But I don't know until I see the document. And
the world may feel like it's metaphorically on fire right now, but we also have to make sure we keep highlighting one truly existential issue that still isn't getting enough attention, and that's climate change. Because this is no longer about the distant future. This is urgent, and it's happening right now. A major new report warns that the environmental crisis is arriving decades earlier than scientists once expected. I want to highlight this new article in The Independent. It's called "Climate Change is Here. Experts Warn Environmental Crisis is Decades Ahead of Forecasts." Be sure to check this out. So according to experts, the extreme events we were once told to expect in the 2050s and beyond are already here. Last year was the third hottest year on record, and the World Meteorological Organization says that 2025 has continued a run of extraordinary global temperatures. The EU now warns that the Paris Agreement's 1.5 degree threshold could be broken before 2030. Samantha Burgess of the Copernicus Climate Change Service put it bluntly. She said climate change is here, and we're seeing events today that models once predicted for the middle of the century. The oceans absorbed more heat in 2025 than any year in modern records. We've seen an increase in wildfires. The Atlantic saw 3 Category 5 hurricanes in a single year, including Hurricane Melissa, which intensified rapidly because of warmer seas, leaving communities with little time to respond. Research from the Grantham Institute shows that climate change has tripled heat-related deaths during European heat waves. In the global south, the impacts are even more devastating and often underreported, With deadly floods in Pakistan and severe drought across East Africa, the International Federation of the Red Cross warns that these disasters are piling on top of existing crises, pushing vulnerable communities to the brink. And even in what insurers like Swiss Re call a, quote, quiet year, economic losses still approached historic averages. These are not normal conditions. I want to be clear about this. This is the reality of climate change now. So let me know your thoughts in the comments. Make it clear that you care about these issues because we're going to keep covering them and we're not looking away. Okay, Ben, back to you.
Democratic Senator Tim Kaine cross-examined Rubio about Donald Trump continuing to mistake Iceland for Greenland, and Rubio admits Donald Trump got it wrong. Donald Trump just said the wrong place. But didn't Caroline Leavitt say that Donald Trump didn't say the wrong place and that Donald Trump just said block of ice, didn't confuse Iceland for Greenland? We all heard what Donald Trump said. He said he wanted to invade Iceland. He shouldn't be invading any of these countries. What are we talking about here? Here, play this clip.
Speech in Davos. Here's something the president said in Davos. I'm helping NATO until the last few days when I told them about Iceland. They loved me. They're not here for us on Iceland. That I can tell you. Our stock market took the first dip yesterday because of Iceland. So Iceland has already cost us a lot of money. President repeatedly mistook Iceland for Greenland, right? We're not mad at Iceland. They haven't cost us any money. The president just mistook the two countries for each other, correct?
Yeah, he meant to say Greenland, but I think we're all familiar with presidents that have verbal stumbles. We've had presidents like that before. Some made a lot more than this one.
Nice try. Thanks. All right. Thank you. I thought he did well.
Next, you have Democratic Senator Shaheen cross-examine Rubio about where this Venezuelan oil money is going. Watch Rubio admit that it's in this Qatari bank account with no oversight by the government. Play this clip.
Right. So it's been reported that the oil sold for $500 million, that $300 million went to Venezuelan government. What happened to the other $200 million?
It's still sitting in the account, is my understanding at this time.
The account in Qatar?
Well, the account, yes, but that will ultimately be that's a short-term account. Ultimately, it will be a U.S. Treasury blocked account in the United States.
And will it also be audited?
Correct. Well, the audit will be on the expenditures. At the front end, we'll tell them this is what the money can be spent on. Again, I'm not talking about all the other revenues the Venezuelan government may have. We're talking about the revenues from the sanctioned oil. At the front end, we will say this is what the allowable expenses are. And then they will agree to fund as part of the overall cost. They will pay for and fund an audit system acceptable to us to ensure that that's how the money was spent.
And can you report?
More from Senator Rosen here, cross-examine Rubio about who actually is running American foreign policy. Are you running the foreign policy? Who's running it? Here, play this clip.
Because despite the fact that you famously or infamously have numerous jobs in the administration, your Secretary of State, your National Security Advisor, it is increasingly unclear who's actually directing U.S. foreign policy under President Trump. We have a Special Envoy Witkoff. He's reportedly conducted Russian-Ukraine talks in Switzerland beyond your awareness. He and Jared Kushner have been described as managing the president's Gaza plan. Meanwhile, Ambassador Barrack is leading on Syria policy, while Special Envoy Boulos is appearing to lead on our Africa policy. So I have to ask you, I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask you, are you the lead for U.S. government on foreign policy?
No. The lead on U.S. foreign policy is named Donald J. Trump, the president of the United States. On the individuals you've described, these are very valuable teams. We have if I can answer, because I think it's important. It's a legitimate question. I have the distinction, but I think both the benefit of being the National Security Advisor and the Secretary of State. As National Security Advisor, my job is to coordinate the interagency function of national security, and that involves foreign policy. So I speak to Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner in the case of Gaza and now Russia, probably 10 times a day. We have multiple meetings and coordination. All of it is we build a team, we gather facts, we present options, and then we take them to the president. It is the president who directs the foreign policy of the United States. That's always been the case, by the way.
You can't overrule.
More cross-examination here from Democratic Senator Duckworth. Watch this. Let's play this clip.
Gang directly
Mr.
responsible
Secretary,
for narco trafficking.
the Trump administration has acknowledged that the vast majority of the men it rounded up and deported to torture under this law had no criminal records whatsoever.
We didn't torture
Independent, over 75%.
Who did we torture? We haven't tortured anybody. We've arrested people that are members of gangs and we've deported them. We don't want gang members in our country.
Have found that many of the men were here legally. If the administration is willing to lie about who it's targeting under this law, what protections do totally innocent people have against abuse. Again, I want to ask you, will you advise the president to rescind his invocation of the Wartime Alien Enemies
No, of course
Act?
not. I mean, these are people that are threats to the national security of the United States. But I've described this in hearings in the past, including
So
before
you're
you guys.
saying that we're at war?
We are absolutely, when it comes to narco trafficking groups and criminal gangs that are targeting the United States for criminal
We're in a
activity,
state of war.
there's no doubt about the fact that we're
So then,
confronting them in
do
a
the
warlike setting
international
because
laws
they're
of
waging
war
war on us.
apply, and do the Geneva Convention
They're waging
apply?
war against us, and they're
Really, Rubio, you're saying that nobody's being tortured or harmed by the ICE or Border Patrol Gestapo? Yet another lie by Rubio. And here Rubio talks about where the Venezuelan oil money is going. He's like, here's the thing. It gets deposited into a blocked account in Qatar. Why Qatar? Why are you moving this money to Qatar? Oh, it's Donald Trump's personal slush fund, isn't it? Here, watch this clip.
that oil, the proceeds of that oil, which by the way is being sold at market price, not at the discount Venezuela was being forced to sell, is being deposited into an account that ultimately will become a U.S. Treasury blocked account here in the United States. They will submit, we will at the front end say, this is what this money can be spent on these things. We will submit to them. They will submit to us a budget request. We want to use this money for these things. And part of the proceeds will go to fund a audit process to make sure that that's how the money is being spent.
So
and that's how we intend to handle those funds in the short term.
There's an actual audit process that's been set up. Who is
It will be set up, and
responsible?
we have a couple options. One option is the XM Bank. They have expertise as bankers and being able to do some of that option. There may be some others in place. We haven't finalized what that audit process would be. We've only made one payment, and that payment we did, and retrospectively will be audited. But it was important we made that payment because they had to meet payroll. They had to keep sanitation workers, police officers, government workers on staff. It was a $300 million payment.
Right. So it's
Then you had Republican Senator Rand Paul cross-examining Marco Rubio for Rubio saying, okay, there was not a war in Venezuela because the Trump regime doesn't want to get the authorization from Congress that's required. So Rand Paul's like, so I just want to understand this. So if another country kidnapped the United States president and brought him off to their country, you're saying that you wouldn't view that as an act of war? Watch Marco Rubio squirm. Here, play this clip.
Our founders debated extensively over which branch of government should have the power to declare or initiate war. Virtually unanimously, they decided, and what was entered into the Constitution was that the declaration or initiation of war would be the power of Congress. Now, we have many advocates, many of whom are here today, who have been advocates for an expansive notion of presidential power. They often argue that wars are not really wars, that they're kinetic actions or drug busts. I think, though, if you reverse the circumstances, it becomes very difficult for these arguments to hold up. So I would ask you, if a foreign country bombed our air defense missiles, captured and removed our president, and blockaded our country, would that be considered an act of war?
Well, I think your question is about and I will acknowledge you've been very consistent on all these points the entire career. So let me no matter who's in charge. So I will point to two things. The first is it's hard for us to conceive that an operation that lasted about 4.5 hours and was a law enforcement operation to capture someone we don't recognize as a head of state, indicted in the United States, wanted with a $50 million bounty.
My question would be, if it only took 4 hours to take our president, it's very short, nobody dies on the other side, nobody dies on our side, it's perfect. Would it be an act of war?
We just don't believe that this operation comes anywhere close to the constitutional definition of war.
But would it be an act of war if someone did it to us? Nobody dies, few casualties, they're in and out. Boom, it's a perfect military operation. Would that be an act of war? Of course it would be an act of war. I'm probably the most anti-war person in the Senate, and I would vote to declare war if someone invaded our country and took our president. So I think we need to at least acknowledge this is a one-way argument. One-way arguments that don't rebound, that you can't apply to yourselves, that cannot be universally applicable are bad arguments.
More from Senator Rand Paul here cross-examining Rubio. Play this clip.
What it is, and let's vote on these things. But I think we're in violation of both the spirit and the law of the Constitution by bombing a capital, blockading a country, and removing elected officials. And we certainly wouldn't tolerate it, nor would I if someone did it to us.
Well, we didn't remove an elected official. We removed someone who was not elected, and it was actually an indicted drug trafficker in the United States, and their system.
Our laws, indicted under our laws. Look, Bolsonaro says that Da Silva is not really the president of Brazil. Our president said Biden wasn't really the president. Hillary Clinton said in 2016 Trump wasn't the president. So you have these arguments, and I agree with you. It probably was, and most likely was, most assuredly was a bad election. He wasn't really elected. But at the same time, if that's our predicate, and you don't have to come to us because it's a drug bust, we're just removing somebody, you can see where it leads to, and it leads to chaos. And that's why we have rules like the Constitution, so we don't get so far out there that presidents can do whatever they want. It is this check and balance. And I would argue for 70 years we've been going the wrong way. It isn't just this president, but it's a debate that I think is worth having.
And I think here Senator Rand Paul just continued to press at this point. Let's play it.
Arguments. So it's a drug bust. What if a foreign country indicts our president for violating a foreign law? Should we extradite our president, or should we be okay if they come in and get him by force?
Look, I think ultimately we're always going to act in our national interest. And so if somebody comes after our national interest, like the case you've described, which obviously does not exist at this time, but the case you've described, the U.S. always has the right to act in its national interest and to protect itself. So really I don't know about this equivalency. Well, does this justify them doing it? We're always going to do what's best for the United States and America. We're always going to protect our system.
But the point isn't, and you're exactly right, we will act in our national interest and we should. So I'm not disagreeing with you at all. What I'm saying is, though, that our arguments are empty then. The drug bust isn't really an argument. It's a ruse. The war argument, not a war, is a ruse. It's not a real argument. And we do what we do because we have the force, we have the might, we do it because it's in our interest. So we wouldn't let anybody come in, bomb us, blockade us, and take our president. We've had arguments about legitimate, illegitimate presidents, bad elections, rigged elections. So there's all kinds of same arguments that we've had in our country that they've had in Venezuela.
And then finally, you have Democratic Senator Tim Kaine discuss how he really would like to use this Senate hearing to talk about the war crimes or crimes against humanity that are being committed off the coast of Venezuela, where the Trump regime just killing people on fishing boats. And they're saying, oh, these are narco terrorists, but we're learning more and more that these people just seem to be on fishing boats. And even if they were having drugs on it, there's not fentanyl on these boats. And even if there was drugs on these boats, which there doesn't appear to be, I think there was one boat maybe smelled of marijuana, maybe. They don't just get to kill and murder people. But Tim Kaine says that the Trump regime has universally declared everything relating to these war crimes to be confidential so that we can't have public hearings on it, which is absolutely despicable. Watch Tim Kaine finish off this hearing. Play this clip.
This operation on September 2nd with the attack on Venezuelans in boats in open waters. And now we are nearly 5 months in. Next week is 5 months. Finally, a public hearing. Wow, how novel. Finally, a public hearing in the Senate or House. This is the first public hearing we've had. 200 folks who are on secret designated combatant lists have been killed. U.S. troops have been injured. Hundreds of millions of dollars have been spent. An armada amassed. The announcement of a new Monroe Doctrine, which does not land well in the Americas. Democrats have been asking over and over again, can we have a public hearing? Can we share what we know with the American public? Finally, a public hearing. But even that hearing is constrained. I'd like to talk about the complete weakness of the legal rationale about the strikes on boats in international waters, but I can't because the administration has only shared it with members in a classified setting. I can't tell you why the domestic rationale is hollow and the international rationale is hollow. I can't tell you why the rationale for attacking Venezuela is hollow because, again, the rationale has been shared with us in a closed setting. I can't share with you the grim details of the murder of shipwrecked survivors in open waters that we all know because we've seen the videos and we've questioned the U.S. military officials involved about legality because the administration will not release that publicly. They released the boat strike videos publicly, but they hid the second strike that killed struggling shipwrecked survivors, even from Congress, for nearly 3 months, but I can't really talk to you about it. I can't talk to you about the weakness of the targeting criteria being used to attack boats in the Caribbean and Pacific. I would encourage any colleague, if you have not, go to the classified setting and ask for a briefing on each strike and ask this question: what was the evidence that there were narcotics on that craft? You will be very surprised if you ask that question about every strike. And so even in this first public hearing, 5 months in, there's a lot we can't talk about. If it was such a righteous operation, why is the administration and the majority in this Senate so jealously protecting the details about it from being revealed to the American public? I have Virginians deployed in this operation. I can't answer their families' questions. Thank God we're having a public hearing 5 months in. This is supposed to be the greatest deliberative body in the world. Mr. Secretary.
There you have it, folks. Let me know what you think there. You saw Marco Rubio squirm. I think obviously he lied over and over again, but I'd love to hear your thoughts. Hit subscribe. Help us get to 6 million subscribers. You may think you're subscribed, but you may not actually be subscribed, so double check. And thanks for watching and have a great one.
The truth is more important than ever. Check out our new Truth Over Lies collection at store.MeidasTouch.com. All 100% USA union made.